The Seacats seemed like a perfect couple. Brett, a 37-year-old former sheriff's deputy, and Vashti, his 34-year-old wife, had been high school sweethearts in Kansas. They tied the knot in a romantic beach wedding in Belize and went on to have 2 young sons together. But after 7 years of marriage, the relationship had fallen apart. In April 2011, Vashti made the difficult decision to file for divorce from Brett. Just 16 days later, on April 30th, tragedy struck. In the early morning hours, the Seacat family home in Kingman, Kansas, burst into flames. Brett managed to escape with the couple's 2 sons, aged 2 and 4, but Vashti's body was found inside, dead from a gunshot wound to the head. What exactly happened that night became the subject of intense scrutiny and a high-profile murder trial. The prosecution alleged that Brett Seacat, furious over the divorce, had shot his wife and then set fire to their home to cover up the crime. The defense claimed Vashti had been depressed and took her own life in a murder-suicide attempt. As the case unfolded, disturbing details emerged about the couple's crumbling marriage and the events leading up to that fatal night. Prosecutors painted a picture of Brett as a controlling, manipulative husband who refused to accept the end of his marriage. They said he had threatened Vashti, telling her he would kill her and make it look like she took her own life if she left him. Friends testified that Vashti had been scared of Brett in the weeks before her death. She reportedly told people that Brett had awakened her one night to tell her about a dream he'd had where he killed her. Vashti's sister said that just before filing for divorce, Vashti had become intimate with a friend and worried Brett would find out. But despite her fears, those close to Vashti said she seemed hopeful about her future as she prepared to start a new chapter in her life. She was making plans to move out, redecorating the house, and even booked a vacation to Mexico with her sister. Vashti worked in human resources for a cable company and by all accounts was a devoted mother who cherished time with her young boys. Brett told a very different story. He claimed Vashti had been struggling with depression for years, possibly exacerbated by her use of a weight loss medicine called HCG. He said she had attempted or considered taking her own life multiple times in the past. Brett portrayed himself as a loving husband and father who was blindsided by Vashti's decision to end their marriage. He said he had urged her to try counseling to save their marriage. On the witness stand, Brett gave his account of that tragic night. He said that he and Vashti had argued earlier in the evening about custody of their sons. Brett went to sleep on the couch downstairs. Around 3 a.m., he claims Vashti called his cell phone and told him to come get the boys. He then heard a pop, followed by a loud boom. Brett says he ran upstairs to find the bedroom in flames and Vashti's lifeless body on the bed. He grabbed the boys and got them out of the house, then tried unsuccessfully to get back to Vashti. But prosecutors said Brett's story didn't add up. For one, he had no soot, blood, or serious burns on him, despite allegedly trying to rescue Vashti from the burning bedroom. They argued that an experienced law enforcement officer like Brett would have known that fire destroys evidence. The prosecution suggested he shot Vashti as she slept, then started the fire to cover his tracks. A key piece of evidence was an alleged death note found in Vashti's journal after her death. It read in part, "Brett, I can't do this. I can't fight this out. Take care of our boys. I love the 2 of you and will be watching over you from heaven." The defense claimed this proved Vashti had taken her own life, but prosecutors said Brett had forged the note. Handwriting experts gave conflicting testimony about the authenticity of the note. A prosecution expert said it didn't match Vashti's handwriting and showed signs of being traced, but a defense expert concluded it was genuine. However, under cross-examination, that expert admitted she was semi-retired and not currently certified in handwriting analysis. Other strange details emerged that prosecutors said pointed to Brett's guilt. The day before Vashti's death, Brett had borrowed an overhead projector from work. The prosecution suggested he used this to trace Vashti's handwriting and create the fake death note. Brett claimed he needed the projector to examine a forged document for a training exercise. Brett was also seen destroying hard drives and old cell phones around the time of Vashti's death. He said he was simply following identity protection advice to destroy old electronics, but prosecutors argued he was covering his tracks. Perhaps most damning was the testimony from the couple's marriage counselor. She said Brett had called her hours after Vashti's death and said, "I killed her. Vashti is dead, and it's my fault." On the stand, Brett explained he felt responsible because he had threatened to expose Vashti's alleged affairs if she went through with the divorce. He believed this pushed her over the edge to take her own life. The trial lasted 12 days as both sides presented their cases. Prosecutors argued Brett had clear motive, rage over the divorce papers Vashti had served him just 2 days earlier. They said the evidence showed he carefully planned the murder, destroying potential evidence beforehand, and using his law enforcement knowledge to stage the scene. The defense maintained there was reasonable doubt about whether Vashti's death was murder or self-inflicted. They pointed to the coroner's inability to conclusively rule it a homicide. Brett's attorneys told jurors that even after months of reviewing evidence, the experienced coroner still had doubts. A private investigator hired by the defense testified to finding vials of the weight loss medicine HCG in the Seacat home. The defense argued this could have contributed to depression in Vashti. Brett's brother said he saw Vashti the weekend before her death and she seemed depressed. But the prosecution countered with testimony from Vashti's friends, who said she was optimistic and excited about her future. They argued a devoted mother would never set fire to a home with her children inside. After hearing all the evidence, it took the jury less than 6 hours to reach a verdict. On June 11, 2013, Brett Seacat was found guilty on all charges: first-degree murder, aggravated arson, and 2 counts of child endangerment. The quick decision suggested jurors found the prosecution's case convincing. Seacat showed little emotion as the verdict was read. His attorney said they were disappointed but respected the jury's decision. Vashti's family expressed relief that justice had been served. At sentencing on August 5, 2013, Seacat was given a hard 50 sentence, life in prison with no chance of parole for 50 years. The judge said Seacat had betrayed his family and his profession and called the crime a very selfish act. The case drew national media attention, with many seeing it as an example of DV taken to the extreme. Advocates said it showed how dangerous the period right after leaving an abusive relationship can be for victims. Looking back at the evidence, several factors likely swayed the jury toward conviction. The timing of the murder, just days after Vashti filed for divorce, provided a clear motive for Brett. Friends' testimonies about Vashti's fear of Brett and his alleged threats to kill her and make it look like she killed herself. Brett's suspicious behavior, like destroying hard drives and borrowing the overhead projector. His incriminating statement to the marriage counselor that he had killed Vashti. The lack of soot or serious burns on Brett, despite his claim of trying to rescue Vashti from the fire. Expert testimony suggesting the death note was forged. The unlikelihood that a loving mother would set fire to a home with her children inside. While the defense raised some doubt with arguments about Vashti's possible depression and the coroner's uncertainty, jurors ultimately found the prosecution's narrative more convincing. They concluded that Brett Seacat, unwilling to accept the end of his marriage, made good on his threats to murder his wife and stage it to look like she killed herself. The case was tragic on many levels. 2 young boys left without their mother, a family destroyed, and a man who had once sworn to uphold the law, now condemned to spend decades behind bars for a brutal crime. For Vashti's loved ones, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but could never erase their pain and loss. Some key details of the crime and investigation. The fire was reported around 3:50 a.m. on April 30th, 2011 at the Seacat home in Kingman, Kansas. Vashti's body was found on the bed in the master bedroom. She had a gunshot wound to the head and neck. A .44 caliber Ruger Red Hawk revolver was found under her body. There were additional gunshot wounds to her torso, hip, and thigh, likely caused by ammunition cooking off in the heat of the fire. A 5-gallon gas can was found on the bed near Vashti's body. The fire originated in the hallway outside the bedroom and spread into the room. Brett and the 2 children escaped the home unharmed. Brett only had a small burn on his foot. Vashti had filed for divorce on April 14th, just 16 days before her death. Investigators found traces of gasoline on Brett's pants from that night. Autopsy results showed no signs of smoke inhalation, suggesting Vashti was likely dead before the fire started. There were no drugs or alcohol found in Vashti's system. The medical examiner could not conclusively determine if the death was self-inflicted or homicide. In the end, the mountain of circumstantial evidence, along with Brett's own incriminating behaviors and statements, proved too much to overcome.